Lieutenant Ethan Cole wasn't a diplomat by trade, but he had a reputation that made him invaluable in alien circles. Calm under pressure, fiercely polite, and adaptable to the unknown. A former soldier turned liaison officer for Earth's Interstellar Relations Division. He had represented humanity at a number of tense negotiations, but never anything like this. The invitation came suddenly. A sleek obsidian sphere arrived via quantum courier at Earth's diplomatic station in orbit above Luna. Upon touch, the device shimmered with a holographic seal, a rotating sigil of silver trees and twin stars. This was unmistakably from the planet Velaroon, one of the most insular and ceremonial species in the galactic Concord. What truly shocked the human delegation was the content of the message. One human shall bear witness to the binding of houses. We request Ethan Cole of Earth. The message was not a request. It was as if Ethan had already been chosen by fate. No one could explain why the Velaroon High Throne, which had rarely interacted with Earth beyond trade protocols, would want a any human present at something as sacred as a royal wedding. But Earth's council was unanimous. Accept the invitation. Send Ethan. Make no mistakes. Ethan, ever composed? Agreed. He prepped for the trip like he would for a mission, brushing up on Velaroon customs, studying their language via implant translator patches, and reviewing the known political landscape. The marriage was to be between Princess Talira, the king's only daughter, and General Vaktar, the decorated military leader from the neighboring Torvex alliance. Their union was meant to end over 3 decades of border skirmishes and distrust. Ethan arrived on Velaroon through the orbital gate network. He was awestruck. Their capital city, Lyrithal, was a work of living art. Towering crystalline spires arced into the clouds like frozen waterfalls, and bioluminescent plants danced with color in rhythmic pulses. The air was sweet, the gravity light, and the alien architecture breathtaking. Upon arrival, he was treated with respectful, if cautious, formality. Velaroon citizens were tall and graceful, with 4 arms and metallic-hued skin that shimmered like moonlight. Their eyes, all shades of blue and violet, seemed to look through you rather than at you. Ethan was the only human in sight, and likely the only one ever to set foot in the royal sanctum. A royal steward presented him with ornate, ceremonial robes that shimmered like liquid opal. Do not remove these until after the binding, he was instructed. And during the vowlight, remain completely still. Ethan nodded politely, confused but cooperative. He chalked the vague instructions up to alien tradition, just another cultural custom to observe. He was led into the great binding hall, a vast circular chamber open to the stars above, where thousands of guests watched from tiered balconies. In the center stood a radiant platform shaped like a lotus blossom, etched with glowing runes. The ceremony began with musical tones unlike anything Ethan had ever heard, part vibration, part melody, all resonating directly in the bones. The bride Talira entered gracefully, her robes fluttering like stardust. The groom, Vaktar, towered beside her, his ceremonial armor lined with trophies from past wars. Then came the vowlight. Without fully understanding the ritual, Ethan was gently directed to step forward onto the same raised platform just beside the couple, within a specific glowing ring. The officiants began a sequence of chanting and lightwork that Ethan couldn't decipher. Beautiful, yes, but entirely alien. He remained perfectly still, exactly as instructed. Unbeknownst to him, that glowing ring signified one of the binding positions, a sacred placeholder in the ceremony traditionally reserved for the soul-bonded, the one being joined to the bride. Ethan, thinking he was merely a diplomatic observer, had just accidentally stood in the role of groom. The vowlight responded to his presence. The runes shifted color. The air turned electric. The crowd gasped. The ancient rite accepted him. Ethan looked around, confused, still unaware of the gravity of what he had just done. Princess Telira turned her head sharply, eyes narrowing in alarm. General Vektar growled in fury and stormed from the platform, shouting in Torvaxian. The priest-elders exchanged frantic gestures. And Ethan? The great binding hall erupted into a storm of voices. Gasps, whispers, and outraged shouts bounced off the crystal walls like a rising tide. The sacred vow light, an ancient, semi-sentient ceremonial energy, had accepted the human as a rightful match for Princess Telira. The act was unthinkable. The ritual, thousands of years old, had never misidentified a bondmate. To the Velaroon, that was like claiming fate itself had chosen Ethan Cole. But Ethan, oblivious to all of this, simply stood still on the glowing dais, trying to piece together what had just gone wrong. The translator embedded in his ear was struggling to keep up with the flood of ceremonial Velaroon language. He caught fragments. Blasphemy, unintended bond, royal line at risk, prophecy. Princess Telira remained poised, but her hands trembled. The glow around her dimmed slightly, an indication of emotional disturbance in Velaroon biology. She turned slowly to face Ethan, her voice calm but clipped. "You were told to remain still," she said. "I did," Ethan replied, confused. "I've barely moved since I got here." "You stood in the vow light," she said. "Do you know what that means?" "I thought it was just a spotlight. You know, for the ceremonial lighting." He gave a nervous laugh. Is this a problem?" The high priest interrupted before she could answer, his forearms raised in despair. "The vow has been sealed. The light does not lie. The union is made." At that moment, General Vektar, the intended groom, let out a furious snarl. His voice echoed through the hall. "You mock us with this Terran filth? The treaty is void." He stormed out, his entourage following, weapons half drawn. Telira's jaw clenched. A political alliance years in the making had just been vaporized by one well-meaning human standing in the wrong spot. As guards escorted Ethan away for protection, whispers followed him. Human bonded, the alien groom, Forbidden's union, destruction or destiny? In the royal chambers, chaos had shifted into cold analysis. Velaroon elders and legal scholars debated interpretations of ancient law. Apparently, the vow light couldn't be overridden, not without igniting religious and cultural unrest. It was designed to recognize truth of bond, not ceremony. And Ethan's presence had somehow triggered it. Telira was furious not with Ethan personally, but with the entire situation. Her marriage was supposed to seal peace between warring factions. Instead, she was now bound to an alien male from a species barely considered galactically mature. Ethan was eventually summoned to her private quarters for explanation. The room was vast and minimalistic, with walls that shimmered like pearl under the soft light. Telira stood in formal royal robes, her expression unreadable. "I assume you now understand the magnitude of your mistake," she said. Ethan rubbed his temple. "Look, I didn't come here looking to marry anyone. I was told to stand still. In the ceremony, I did exactly that. If anything, your officiants made the mistake." Telira gave a bitter smile. "That may be true, but perception is everything. You and I are now bound by a ritual older than your species' ability to write." He frowned. "So what does that mean? I wear a fancy ring and smile at cameras?" "It means," she said sharply, "you are now a political flashpoint. The Torvex will claim sabotage. Our High Council is split. Your people are watching. The galaxy is watching. And if either of us missteps, entire nations will fall into war." Ethan leaned back against a pillar. "All right, so we keep up appearances. Act like this was the plan." Play the part until we figure out a clean exit. She narrowed her eyes. You would pretend to be bonded to someone you don't love? He shrugged. I was trained to fake diplomacy. This can't be worse than surviving 2 years on Meridian Prime. He paused, then softened his tone. Look, I don't want to trap you in this any more than you want me around. But maybe we work together. For now. Silence fell between them. Then slowly she nodded. Double quotes, fine, she said. But if you embarrass me in public, I'll feed you to the skyworms. Ethan chuckled. Noted. The next day, their first public appearance as a married couple took place. A press event, a diplomatic walk. Talira walked with regal grace. Ethan, slightly awkward but disarmingly confident, waved at the curious crowds. The weeks following the accidental marriage were a diplomatic blur. To outsiders, Ethan Cole and Princess Talira appeared as a functioning royal couple. Together, they attended ceremonies, issued statements, and appeared on interstellar broadcasts. They were polished and formal, but behind the curtains, their relationship was still one of necessity, not affection. Talira remained cold and analytical. As heir to Velarune's throne, she had been trained since childhood to carry the weight of her people's expectations. To her, emotions were dangerous and diplomacy was survival. Ethan, by contrast, was easygoing but observant. His military training gave him discipline, but his humanity showed through in small acts. Asking how the guards were doing, sharing jokes with servants, helping a frightened alien child during a public event. Those gestures didn't go unnoticed. At first, Talira dismissed his behavior as performative. But the more she watched, the more she realized Ethan wasn't faking it. He treated every alien, regardless of station or species, with the same decency he would show another human. He didn't posture. He didn't manipulate. He was genuine, there. Private conversations slowly shifted. Where once they only discussed logistics and appearances, they now talked about culture, values, even their childhoods. Ethan admitted to missing Earth, its smell, its skies, the feel of rain. Talira confessed she'd never once walked alone without guards since the age of 10. One night, over a shared bottle of synthafruit wine in a sky garden overlooking the glowing capital, Talira asked him, "Are all humans like you?" Ethan chuckled. "No, some are worse. Some are better. But I think most of us are trying." That answer, simple as it was, lingered with her. Across the galaxy, others were not as charmed. The RL Syndicate, a covert criminal political faction that profited from the Velarune-Torvex conflict, saw the accidental marriage as a threat to their operations. If a stable alliance formed between humans and the Velarune, it would eliminate decades of manipulation and chaos the Syndicate had orchestrated behind the scenes. And now, Ethan Cole, a human from a world known for punching above its weight class, was the public face of that alliance. The Syndicate's solution was simple. Break the bond before it solidified. Assassinate the human. Destabilize the peace. Restart the war. They began with subtle tactics, disinformation campaigns, forged messages claiming Earth disavowed the marriage, even a fabricated tabloid story alleging Ethan was an Earth agent, sent to seduce royal blood, but the couple didn't break. Ethan had seen propaganda before. So had Talira. Then came the first assassination attempt, a cloaked drone disguised as a ceremonial lamp detonated near their diplomatic procession. Thanks to Ethan's quick instincts, he shielded Talira with his own body, taking the brunt of the blast's kinetic wave. He suffered a fractured arm and minor burns, but refused hospital bed rest. The footage of him shielding the Velarune, Princess the Death Worlder taking a hit for a ruler not his own, went viral across Concord media. Public sentiment began to shift. Within the palace walls, things changed. Talira visited Ethan in the infirmary. She didn't say much, just sat by his side, her expression unreadable. When he woke up, the first thing he said was, "You okay?" She nodded. "You nearly died." "Well," he smiled weakly, "marriage is full of surprises." She didn't laugh. Instead, she leaned in and whispered, "You didn't have to protect me." "I know," he replied, "but I wanted to." It wasn't love. Not yet, but it was trust. Something deeper than forced unity. From then on, Talira began involving Ethan more in internal matters, council briefings, military overviews, even cultural discussions she once considered too delicate for outsiders. His perspectives, often grounded in practicality and human adaptability, provided insight her advisors had overlooked. Ethan, in turn, started to understand how rigid the Velaroon system was and how much pressure Talira lived under. Her coldness wasn't arrogance, it was survival. One evening, a conversation sealed the shift in their bond. "You know," Ethan said, staring at the stars, "for something that started as a mistake, this might be the most important thing I've ever done." Talira looked at him for a long moment. "Mistakes," she said softly, "don't hold hands when no one is watching." They were no longer just allies. They were partners. But the Aural Syndicate had one more move to make. As the bond between Ethan and Talira deepened, so did the danger. With subtlety having failed, the Syndicate prepared something far more direct. They would strike during the Festival of Continuance, an ancient Velaroon celebration of unity and new beginnings, a perfect cover for chaos. As the galaxy watched the human-alien marriage with cautious hope, enemies worked in the shadows to ensure that the next explosion would not be symbolic, but fatal. The question now wasn't whether Ethan and Talira could act like they belonged together. It was whether they could survive it. The Festival of Continuance was more than just a cultural celebration. It was a sacred tradition observed by the Velaroon to mark transitions, new alliances, and unity through change. It was only fitting that this year's event would honor the unexpected, yet now highly visible, union between Princess Talira and the human ambassador consort, Ethan Cole. For weeks, preparations had overtaken Velaroon's capital. Floating gardens bloomed in defiance of gravity. The sky glowed with aurora streams powered by energy projectors, and artisan lightforms played out scenes of historical unity above the palace. Talira and Ethan would stand at the wedding gate, a ceremonial arch at the entrance to the city that symbolized trust between peoples. There, they would reaffirm their bond not as a couple by tradition, but as one born of circumstance and strengthened by shared trials. But beneath the surface beauty, danger stirred. The Aural Syndicate had lost patience. Their political influence had slipped. Trade routes were stabilizing, old rivalries were cooling. The accidental marriage had succeeded where decades of diplomacy had failed. For the Syndicate, that made Ethan Cole not just a nuisance, but a threat to their empire of chaos. And so, they chose their moment. During the height of the festival, during the most public celebration Velaroon had hosted in a century, they infiltrated the outer ring of palace security, disguising operatives as entertainers and service personnel. Their objective wasn't subtle anymore. Assassinate Ethan Cole. If possible, kill Talira too. Collapse the alliance in blood. Let the chaos do the rest. The morning of the festival began peacefully. Ethan adjusted the ceremonial sash, draped across his shoulder, blinking at the weight of it, actual star silk woven from photonic fibers. Talira helped him fasten the brooch, with a look of amused frustration. You would think a man who can dismantle a plasma rifle in 10 seconds wouldn't struggle with the clasp. He smirked. I wasn't trained in high fashion at the academy. They exchanged a glance, subtle, warm, and no longer guarded. The palace staff noticed, so did the cameras. Rumors began swirling in news feeds across the Concord. The bond grows stronger. Unity or romance? The truth behind the human-princess alliance. It was working. Their public partnership had become real. But the syndicate was already in motion. As the couple approached the ceremonial wedding gate, an ancient arch of crystal and metal, suspended above the main city thoroughfare, Ethan's instincts twitched. Noticed a shadow move in the wrong direction. A light drone humming off rhythm. A child crying, then abruptly silenced. In the distance, a hovercart parked too long. He scanned the crowd. Something wasn't right. Then a flicker of motion. A lens glint. The high whine of a charge cycle. Ethan tackled Talira to the ground a split second before a plasma bolt seared past where her head had been. Screams erupted. Chaos followed. Explosions detonated along the procession path. A syndicate gunship uncloaked above the palace perimeter, strafing the air with fire. Drones swarmed the sky, some carrying fragmentation charges, others projecting anti-detection fields to confuse defenders. Velaroon royal guards responded immediately, but they were unprepared for this level of coordination. Ethan didn't wait for orders. Bleeding from a gash on his shoulder, he grabbed a fallen guard's pulse rifle and pulled Talira behind an overturned energy cart. "Stay down," he barked. "I am not hiding." She snapped, pulling a sidearm from her ceremonial belt. "There." Eyes met. A silent agreement passed between them. Then they charged together. Moving as one, the human soldier and the Velaroon princess wove through the chaos. Ethan directed the guards with military hand signals, coordinating flanks and suppressive fire. Talira shot with precision, disabling a syndicate drone just as it descended on a group of civilians. They reached the source of the attack, a syndicate uplink van transmitting targeting data. Ethan leapt onto the vehicle's roof and ripped open the control core, hot wiring it using his implant interface. Sparks flew. The uplink died. Syndicate drones lost guidance and crashed like falling stars. The remaining attackers, leaderless and exposed, retreated. The battle was over. The wedding gate burned behind them. But the crowd was safe. Talira was alive. And Ethan Cole had just become a legend. After the smoke cleared, Ethan slumped beside Talira, breathing hard. "You always this intense on date nights?" He joked. She exhaled and looked at him, face streaked with ash, eyes still fierce. "You ran toward the fire." "Toward me." He met her gaze. "I said I'd protect you." "I meant it." The aftermath of the festival attack was far-reaching. Though the Aurel Syndicate had failed to kill Ethan Cole or Princess Talira, they had left a scar physical and symbolic on Velaroon's capital. The wedding gate, a monument to ancient unity, lay in smoking ruins. Debris littered the sacred road. Lives had been lost. Trust, in some corners, shaken. But something unexpected happened. Instead of breaking under the weight of the attack, the bond between Velaroon and Earth hardened. The footage of Ethan shielding Talira, then charging into the fire beside her, had gone viral across galactic networks. Millions saw a Terran and outsider risk his life not just for a princess, but for a people not his own. For many across the Concord, it was the first time humanity was seen not just as warriors or upstarts, but as something more: partners, protectors, equals. Earth's Interstellar Council recognized this shift instantly. Within days, they dispatched a delegation to formally endorse the Union and promote Ethan to full diplomatic authority under the title Ambassador, Consort of Velaroon-Terran Alliance. Ethan had started this journey as an invited guest. Now his presence on Velaroon was official, political, historical. But Earth also had its own demands. After the successful defense during the attack and the media storm that followed, Ethan was requested to return to Earth both to report and to help establish next steps for the Alliance. He was scheduled to leave in just 5 days. The mood inside the palace shifted once more, not with tension, but with something more complicated: uncertainty. Taylira found herself alone in the Star Garden. On the 4th night, for the first time in weeks, Ethan had missed a shared meal. He was in a strategy meeting with Earth's delegation. The absence made her feel unbalanced. It wasn't just the politics anymore. It wasn't just appearances. She had grown to rely on him not for status or power, but for his honesty, his humor, his grounding presence in a world of formality and manipulation. She began to realize that her thoughts often began with him, and she wasn't sure when that had started. When Ethan finally found her that evening, she didn't speak right away. Neither did he. They simply stood beneath the glowing vines, stars above them, silence between them. "You're leaving," she finally said. "I was asked to report back. Maybe for a few weeks. Maybe longer," she nodded once. "And then?" Ethan hesitated. "That depends on what you want." He wasn't smiling. He wasn't being clever. His voice was steady but vulnerable. "I never planned to be here," he said. "Never planned to get married. Definitely didn't plan to survive multiple assassination attempts, win over an alien population, or get my name carved into a monument I didn't ask for. But I'm here. And I've never regretted that." Taylira turned toward him fully. "Do you regret me?" "No," he said instantly. "Not for a second." She closed the distance between them, her silver robe brushing against his. "Then don't leave." Ethan blinked. "Just stay?" "Stay. Not for the Alliance. Not for appearances. For us. Because I'm tired of pretending this wasn't real from the moment you stood in that light." Ethan stepped forward. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more." He didn't need another word. The next morning, the Earth delegation received word that Ethan Cole would not be returning with them. Instead, a new joint declaration was released across all networks. The Velaroon Throne and the Terran Diplomatic Corps announced the permanent formation of the Velaroon-Terran Accord, bound by mutual respect, shared defense, and cultural unity. Its first leaders, Ambassador Ethan Cole and Princess Taylira Velaroon. The news sent shockwaves through the Concord. Allies celebrated. Enemies panicked. The RL Syndicate's network began collapsing as former allies turned on them, seeking favor with the new power couple. But for Ethan and Taylira, the headlines no longer mattered. Weeks later, on Earth, 2 figures disembarked. A sleek diplomatic ship onto Terran soil. Cameras flashed. Crowds gathered. Ethan walked down first dressed in half Velaroon, half Terran attire, smiling in that relaxed way reporters had come to recognize. But what stunned the crowd was the woman. Beside him, Princess Taylira, radiant in Terran blues and Velaroon silvers, walking beside her husband like she had always belonged. They had come not just to fulfill duties. They had come home to both worlds. In the end, Ethan had attended a wedding not meant for him. He'd made a mistake in the eyes of tradition. And in doing so, he'd found a cause, a people, a partner, and a future. He had gone to another world alone. And he never came back that way again.